What Iran's done is it's raised the cost. It's raised the cost of this conflict for Israel. It's also raised the cost for the United States, because the United States and Israel are joined at the hip. So any problems Israel has politically, public image-wise, whether they're winning or losing this, or militarily, the United States has that problem as well, because they are working together. They are absolutely intertwined and intermeshed in everything they do. So this is a big advantage for fighting proxy wars. And this also puts to bed any speculation of whether this is a proxy war or not. It's so obviously a proxy war, just like Ukraine is a proxy war. The West, NATO, and the U.S. are fighting Russia with Ukraine. Here they are clearly fighting Iran. The United States is absolutely using, Israel's taking a pounding for the United States. It's absolutely in the interests of the U.S. for this war to carry on. This looks like a strategic objective of the United States to have regime change.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like I'm not sure whose objective. I don't know if it's Donald Trump's or somebody else's. We can certainly go down that path here, but let me take a look at the diplomatic level, because the Iranian side asked for a meeting of the National Security Council, the UN National Security Council meeting in today, and the Iranian ambassador kind of gave a preview of what he wanted to talk about and where they stand.
Definitely, if United States is going to involve in the aggression against Iran, it will receive firm and resolute response. Iran will show no any doubt, no any hesitation, no any reluctance in defending the people, in defending our integrity, in defending our country, and in defending the humanity, because what we are doing is to defend international law, to defend humanity. Our military forces are monitoring the activities of the United States, and there is a red line set for the United States. If the United States cross that line, the response will come.
Now, I played that in particular because there's dueling narratives. You talked about this a second ago. That's the Iranian side, and they say, we've been attacked. This is about humanitarian issues. This is about international law. They claim Israel has violated that. And then you had the Israeli ambassador, Danny Danon, give a slightly different take. Sorry, Gary's got to cue that one up a little bit. Sorry about that. Just a second. Here we go.
Iran is not under attack. Iran is being stopped. On Wednesday evening, it launched a ballistic missile directly at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, in the southern part of Israel. It is the largest hospital in the region. Soroka Hospital serves more than 1 million civilians of all backgrounds. This was a war crime, deliberate, indiscriminate, and barbaric. Israel's actions have been precise and compliant with international law. Our targets are military. Our objective is clear: to dismantle the Iranian regime's genocidal capabilities before it is too late.
That's good enough right there, Gary. So a lot to unpack there. But first of all, what do you make of his opening statement there that Iran is not under attack?
And that Israel's abiding by international law, waging undeclared wars of aggression. I guess that's the highest crime you can possibly commit in international law. So I don't know what he's talking about, but that's from the world's most moral army there. And by the way, Soroka Hospital, the hospital he's talking about, it wasn't targeted directly. It wasn't even hit directly. What it was, it does appear that Iran was targeting a intelligence facility, which is right next to Soroka Hospital, and then the blast caused damage at that hospital. So again, do you trust? Does anybody believe anything the Israelis say? This is a government, mind you, that has targeted and destroyed over 40 hospitals and medical facilities in Gaza, and not only that, have killed doctors, medical workers, EMS responders, and in some cases, according to the UN Rapporteur on Human Rights, even tortured some doctors and medical workers after they've captured some of these hospitals. So they're just not credible, the Israelis. So it's more
Yeah,
common.
but the reality of it is, when he makes statements like that, he knows that there's folks like you and I that are going to call this out, and he's just going to say it's a blatantly untrue, and here is the truth, here physically is it. But I think their target audience is those who are already passionate believers in the West, and especially in the United States and Great Britain, because they will eat this up and they will repeat it ad nauseum, because they will never look at the other side, all these other pieces of information. And I think that they make those statements, decide how absurd it is on face value, but they could care less on that. They just want to reinforce their core believers because, and you tell me what you observe, I think they're bleeding a lot of core believers, and a lot of people are drifting away because it's getting too much, too contrasty between what's being said and what's being observable on their screens.
Yeah, not only that, a lot of the news reports for this hospital, they would put other footage that wasn't of the hospital itself. That was a common thing on social media that I've seen in terms of the information warfare with Israel. So there's no journalistic standards. Not all that's out the window. It's just literally waves and waves of information. And they're trying to move the dial in terms of public opinion. So I don't know. It's like you said, Danny. They're talking to their core audience, which in the United States are whoever's supporting Donald Trump and supporting this effort, and other elected officials. So it's the earlier statement though by Iran is much more interesting. You notice how measured they are, how careful they are, how precise they are, and they're completely not over the top. This isn't Baghdad Bob that we saw 22 years ago. This is different. And that says a lot about the Iranian government, which we call the, quote, regime. Who's acting like a regime and who's acting like a government at this point?
Yeah, well, hey, I think that speaks for itself there. I want to circle back around to something you said at the top of the show here. You're talking about this Seymour Hersh piece. Now, at least as far as I saw when it came out, that was written and published either right before or right after Trump made this 2-week thing. So the question was going to be, because Seymour Hersh has sometimes been prescient, like nobody's business, has uncovered stuff that nobody knew, and he's been pretty wrong on a few big issues too over the years. So like anybody, you got to take and examine the facts as you can get it. But do you see any other corroborating information that would suggest that Trump's 2 weeks was not a change in whatever Hersh had been reporting? And the reason I ask this is because some of the sources that I had queried prior to Trump making that statement were in line with what Hersh was saying, and they were dumbfounded too, and they were blindsided, thinking, "Wow, well, something dramatically changed because now all of a sudden it's not coming." Because there was some thought it was going to come that night, and then obviously it hasn't since. At least the U.S. involvement. What do you make of all this?
Well, you have to remember, Danny, this precedes the big media talking point of who has more missiles left. How long can Israel last? 10 to 12 days. How long can the Iranians last? And it just so happens Trump says, "Oh, we're going to wait 2 weeks." Why 2 weeks? Why not 1 week? Why not a month? No, to restock perhaps, because this is clearly a problem for Israel. So that could be a clue there. Is Hersh accurate? Is this dependable? Not sure. But the contents of it, though, is even more interesting. Is that they're saying that the supreme leader, Khamenei, needs to go. Everything will be fine as soon as he goes. So that's clearly the policy is regime change there. And the other thing was about J.D. Vance heading up some of these working groups, whereby they're talking about replacing the supreme leader with a moderate religious leader, and then there's an argument between the American side and the Israelis. The Israelis want a political puppet. They say they don't care about the religious aspect of it as well. So that certainly was interesting. There could be a lot of truth in that, and that gives us a bit of a signal as to what the priorities are. But it's clearly regime change. So this is interesting. If this is about press and about putting out information for public consumption, then it creates a sub-argument, which is, well, okay, we're going to do regime change, but are we going for a political puppet or a moderate religious leader, or we're going to put Al-Qaeda in charge like we did in Syria? So it creates a new public segue for discussion. So I look, all of this is information warfare in terms of leaks, in terms of disclosures. The whole Tulsi Gabbard controversy, I don't know how much of that is actually theater and how much of that is real. It's very difficult to tell because Trump, it is all about theatrics and WWF, fake fights and things like this. So it's really hard to
Fair enough. We got to take it by, but in addition to, sometimes I'm less inclined to go down that path because there would have to be like a 3D chess mind behind it to be able to choreograph stuff. And I don't see one of those. So I don't know, but that's just my guess. But let me tell you one thing I do see though, is that there's some folks that ain't the sharpest pen in the drawer, if I can be kind here. There was if you still have this available in the Wall Street Journal, there was a piece by retired 4-star General Wesley Clark, who was a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. And he put up with his idea about, listen, hey, we don't have to be military all the time. Let's give peace a chance. And his definition of peace, I'm not making this up. I'm not just reading between the lines. These are the lines here. Mr. Trump, he wrote, has the leverage to achieve a 2-track approach, a diplomatic solution that would defang the regime. Mr. Trump could require Iran to stop all its nuclear efforts, give up uranium enrichment permanently, renounce its aims to destroy Israel and the U.S., end its hegemonic aspirations, and cease supporting terrorism. In return, because, if it's a diplomacy, you got to give something to get something. In return, the U.S. wouldn't destroy Iran with military force. Well, now there's a package that anybody would really think long and hard about accepting. But I mean, that kind of is just, that's not even delusion. In my view, that's just like comedy.
That's Wesley Clark is basically reiterating what Trump's putting out on True Social, unconditional surrender. That's basically what he said there. But all of this conversation, all of this predicated on fake presumptions about Iranian nuclear weapons. And there's clearly no evidence that anybody, including our intelligence community in the United States, has that Iran has or is actively pursuing nukes. So that puts the time horizon at least 12 months, maybe more. Not only that, you have all of the other co-sponsors and people who were stakeholders in the JCPOA as well. They're not coming out waving intelligence briefings about Iran's nukes. This is all coming out of Tel Aviv and Trump's head. He was confronted by a CNN reporter. Do you believe your DNI's assessment that Iran doesn't have a nuke and is not pursuing a nuke? And Trump says, I don't care what she says. I have my own idea. I just have a hunch. Trump has a hunch. He can see with his X-ray vision underground below, 50 meters below and four-door, and he knows what's going on there. I think it's more like somebody is in his ear, and we kind of have a good idea
Patrick,
of what that
somebody
is.
who doesn't have to worry about using their X-ray vision is the IAEA. I think it was Secretary General, who this morning released a statement that completely corroborated what Tulsi Gabbard said back in March, where he says there is no nuclear weapons program. The Supreme Leader has said, he literally just almost parroted what she said. And he said, look, we have plenty of room for negotiated settlement. Iran is willing to negotiate. They're willing to give in on some things, et cetera. We don't have to use military force for this. So that completely undercuts what Netanyahu said, that they have firm evidence that they had made the decision. Yet the guy on the ground who has been critical of Iran, it's not like he's a pro-Iranian guy, but he said, no, they don't have a nuclear weapons program, which shreds the whole justification for this alleged attack, which even by itself, and if you want to comment on this, go ahead, even if what they said was true, that doesn't justify under any kind of international law the authorization to attack another country because they might have been moving in that direction. What do you say?
Absolutely, Danny. And not only that, you don't want to attack that country in the middle of negotiations. We have to remember, and this is the problem with Trump. It's literally flood the zone with chaos, and people forget the simplest, most basic things. They're in the 6th round of negotiations with the Iranians about a nuclear deal. And Trump had said, we want 0 enrichment. And then they say, no, we're willing to do 3. And they say, Trump tweets out, we've agreed on 3. It's all signed and sealed and delivered by Monday. And all of a sudden, big pivot, a U-turn on Monday. No, we forget that. We want 0 enrichment. And the next thing you know, it's like, we're close to a deal. And then Israel attacks. So they were in the middle of negotiations. And then after Israel kills the counterparts in the negotiations on the Iranian side, and then Trump is boasting about it on social media. So I think the diplomatic route is pretty much dead and buried as far as the Iranians will not take the United States seriously. They're going to, much like the Russians, in the stoic fashion, they're going to go and do what they need to do. But in fact, what the Israelis and Donald Trump have done, they've made the argument for the hardliners in Iran, and there are hardliners in Iran. They've already made their argument of why they should have a nuclear deterrent. If anything, the events of the last week have firmed that argument up within Iran to the point where even moderates are now considering discussing that. So was that the plan of Israel and the United States, to push Iran further down the road, pull back now, and then come back and hit them hard when they've developed a nuclear weapon or withdrawn from the NPT? Who knows? But right now we're at a real threshold of the region going up in flames, and who knows? This is totally new territory for Israel and for the U.S. This is the first time the United States has faced potentially an adversary that is able to hit back.
Yeah.
And hit back accurately. And that's not a small thing. So
No,
all of the doctrines, all of the handbooks, all of the experience of the Joint Chiefs, they don't have any experience with this.